Wow, Meenakshi, such a beautiful explanation.
I am going to send a scorched earth email to everyone in the team and pull the plug on the project. I am done with being patient. So much of money is spent, yet where is the result?
Hold on, Ritu. I hear the fever speaking. You are in the heat of the moment. Ritu, stop just for 10 seconds.
10 seconds? We don't have 10 seconds. The deadline is just tomorrow.
If you send that email now, you aren't leading, you are just venting. Remember the hierarchy we discussed? Your senses are flooded, your mind is caught in result anxiety, but your intelligence, your buddhi is offline. Right now, you're letting the fever drive the car.
Hello to everyone. We've spent the last 4 sessions in building up a map of how your mind works. We looked at the internal landscape. We learned how to tell the difference between the things that we can control and the things that we cannot control. We practiced how to stay steady when the outside world is chaotic. Let's be honest. Having a map is one thing. Navigating the actual terrain is something else. This is exactly what we are right now. We have the map, but now we need to learn how to navigate it. So, in this session, we are going to talk about the fever of the mind. We all know what happens when desire, anger, greed takes charge of us. Our perspective narrows. We stop seeing the things clearly. So, we are at this point in the series discussing about this topic because without a way to manage our reactions, all that we have covered till now stays a theory. This session is about the practical side of things. It's about learning to spot the mental fever the moment it starts, because it's like the normal fever. If the when a person has a fever, if you control it much earlier, it leads to much less complications, and the person can get cured much faster. So you can stop when you catch the fever the moment it starts. You can stop it before it degrades your judgment. We are moving from just understanding how your mind works to actually keeping your head in the game where it matters. So let's come to the topic today. In the part one, all along we've been talking about the foundations of self mastery, and today we are going to move from reactive chaos to proactive clarity. Now, the concept over here is, as we have discussed in the previous sessions also, the biggest conflict is often not external. It's a result of unmanaged internal landscape. Let's look at an example. Imagine you receive a critical, unprofessional email from a stakeholder at 10 p.m. Now, the reactive chaos is you draft an immediate, sharp response fueled by the ego's need to win and to defend your position. But the proactive clarity, if you look at the proactive clarity, you acknowledge the frustration that you feel in your mind. What do? You close the laptop, you address, and you decide to address a matter the next morning after your emotions have settled. This is where now we talk about identifying the mechanics of the mind. Now, the fever of the mind is a cognitive agitation where your strategic capacity is hijacked by emotional volatility. In the framework of the strategic architect that we have been talking all along, it is the fundamental barrier that prevents a person from making objective, high value decisions. So here it is not just it is characterized not just as an emotion, but essentially the specific destructive loop that forces you out of the clarity, out of the proactive clarity, into the reactive chaos. Now, the fever is composed of three primary interconnected drivers. What are they? They are desire, anger, greed. Now, if we look at desire, let's look at an example. A salesperson often obsessed by desire to close the deal, uh, to hit the quarterly target, goes or tries to pressurize the client so much that he or she ends up in losing the client, losing the deal. So if you look at the desire is the result anxiety. There's a craving for a specific outcome, craving for a specific result, craving for a job. So when the ambition is while the ambition is necessary, the fever of desire, what it does is it shifts the focus entirely to the results rather than the process. Now this is where the trap is. When you become obsessed with the win, obsessed with the goal, you lose the ability to see the current, to see what is there right now, what you have on the board. You develop a results anxiety that clouds your vision, making you willing to sacrifice the long-term strategy for the short-term gain. You just want relief in the short term, but you forget that it is essential to lose certain short-term battles to win the big war. So it's all about because of the reactive anxiety, the person forgets that it's often necessary to lose the smaller battles to win the larger war. Now, let's look at the second trigger, the second driver, the anxiety. What is anxiety? Anxiety is the immediate disruptor of logic. It is the ego's response to a blocked path or a disrupted plan. It's a trap. And anger is like a physiological or a psychological need to just lash out or force a correction. It kills the calm mind, the steady core required to navigate a person in a complex situation. Let's look at an example. A manager is shouting in a meeting just because the project timeline has slipped, causing the team to shut down rather than to solve the problem. Coming to the third driver, the greed, the scarcity loop. Now, here what happens? As an example, let's look at a leader who cannot delegate because that leader wants to control every detail. The leader wants focus. The leader wants credit for everything. So essentially what happens is the leader ends up creating a bottleneck that halts the growth. The greed is a more mindset. It manifests as a more mindset. It prevents you from finding satisfaction in the current reality. It keeps you trapped in a cycle of constant pursuit, constantly trying to get something, constantly trying to gain something. So the trap, it makes a high performance balance impossible because the person is perpetually focusing on acquisition rather than optimization of the resources. So it creates a deficit in the person's mental state, which eventually spills into the overall team culture, overall in the work culture. So let's look at the anatomy of the downfall. Now this is also explained in the verse 63 of chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. Krodhat bhavati sammoha, sammohat smriti vibhramaha, smriti भ्रम शात buddhi nashat pranashyati. Now, what is the anatomy of loss? The danger isn't, in the previous slides, I spoke about the fever. The danger isn't the fever. It isn't the emotion itself. It is the resulting damage. It is the resulting decline that happens because of the fever. The fever, that is the three drivers, let's say the desire, the anger, the greed, take over. What happens? The person loses the ability to discriminate between what is real and what is projected fear. The memory or the values get eroded. When the person is in fever, the person forgets the North Star. Remember, we discussed the North Star in the second session. So the person forgets the North Star. The person forgets the most important goal that the person is focusing on. So the past learning, the professional values, the tactical experience all become inaccessible just because the cognitive resources are spent in protecting the ego by these three drivers. So the intelligence of the person gets destroyed. The memory of the values is gone. The person's ability to discriminate, buddhi, fails. The person begins to make choices that are fundamentally at odds with one's own strategic goals. So what do we take away from this? The takeaway from this is that fever is clinical. It's a measurable loss of intelligence. The way we talk about the fever that a patient gets, it's clinical. You can measure the fever and you can treat it. Similarly, over here, this fever is clinical. It is measurable. It's a loss of intelligence. Now, as a strategic architect, we are not telling you to suppress the emotions. That is wrong. It is impossible. What you need to understand is you need to recognize when the temperature is rising. That is when the panic is rising. The proactive clarity is the act of catching that fever, catching the three drivers, catching the desire, catching the anger, catching the greed before it takes you over. When you catch it in time, it prevents the degradation of your judgment that would lead to eventual poor execution. So that is what is the strategic takeaway. Now, Over to you, Minakshi.
Thank you, Dr. Sandhya. So, as we see emotional regulation, so if we take the example from Bhagavad Gita, I have chosen Shloka 3.42 from chapter 3, which is trying to highlight the hierarchy of control. Like in every organization, there is a hierarchy. There is an officer. Over an officer, there is an assistant manager. Over an assistant manager, there is a manager. Over that, we have a CEO. That way, there is a hierarchy that may be very long hierarchy, but there is a hierarchy. In a similar fashion, there is a hierarchy in our internal system as well. As I recite the shloka 3.42, it reads, Indriyani paranya hurindrebhya param mana, manasastu para buddhyor, buddhi paratastu saha. Which means Krishna is trying to explain here. Like there are four levels. The senses are superior to the body. The mind is higher than the senses. The intellect is higher than the mind. And beyond everything, beyond even the intellect, is the self. So there is a deep explanation, a step by step into the inner hierarchy. So we start with senses. Senses is indriya here, and we know that we have five senses: see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. What are these five senses? These five senses are nothing but they bring inputs from the outside world. Your world starts when your senses are there. If you close your eyes, you cannot see anything. Obviously, you're not going to get any input. When you hear something, then only you either find the music is melodious, or you are finding criticisms outside. So it gets inside. When you taste something sweet or bitter, you can identify. Touch, cold, and hot. Again, the identification happens. And smell, is it a foul smell or is it a fragrance? So that way, the senses are the first and the foremost thing which welcomes anything from the outside world. Second comes mind, which is man. What is the role of mind here? There are three roles. Number one, it generates thoughts, it creates emotion, it reacts quickly. This is where the emotions arise. Third is intellect, buddhi. What is the role of intellect here? It discriminates. It decides between what is right and what is wrong. And most importantly, it has the power to pause. This is your decision maker. This is going to guide you. And last but not at all the least, self, the Atma, the pure awareness part, which is there in each of us, which is the observer, which is unaffected. Right from very beginning to we have reached the session 5. Right from the very beginning, we are trying to uh, explain what self is. The self is our true identity. So emotional regulation insight, like if I tell you a problem happens, it senses trigger. Something happens. Maybe you don't like that email at 10 p.m., which Dr. Sandhya was talking about. Maybe you have an uninvited guest at your home. Maybe you were getting ready for your office or college or whatever important meeting, and you spill the milk or coffee on your dress and you had to change, and which took another 15 minutes. Anything and everything can be a trigger here. And once that trigger happens, your mind reacts. What is mind? Mind is reacting. We have given this difference between reaction and response over a period of time. And then, as soon as the mind reacts, emotions take over. Why? If the mind is sad, the emotions are crying, or maybe overthinking. If the mind is angry, the emotions will be responding back, or no, I shouldn't say responding back, shouting, or maybe showing violence or showing tantrum. So what is the solution when the senses trigger and the mind is reacting and the emotions take over? So as we explain and here to guide you all on emotional regulation, when we are regulating the emotion, we have to pause and understand how this hierarchy is formed. So we have to activate our intellect and stay rooted in awareness. These are the two things which we can control. We cannot control our senses because senses have already taken or brought in the inputs. The mind, what it knows, it just does it. And it is when the intellect and the self awareness, when these two things take power, or you can say they take charge, then only the mind and the senses are going to follow the action. So without awareness, what happens? trigger, any trigger happens, senses bring it in inside your world, inside you, and then mind uh, just reacts, and the reaction happens. When we are living with awareness, then what happens? Same situation, trigger happens, and the five senses bring in the input into your inner world. The mind here, with intellect, it pauses. And when it pauses, it gets time to respond. And when a mind takes a pause, it doesn't react, it responds. So your emotions are not the final authority. Like many people say, I am very short tempered, I am very greedy, I get very tempted towards fast food, or I find reducing weight very difficult. I cannot wake up early. So anything and everything, whatever you are doing, your emotions are not your final authority, but your awareness is. And before awareness, even the at intellect level, if you can be the decision maker, then you develop at awareness level also. I take an example, a real life example. Somebody criticizes you. What happens? Senses. You hear words. You hear words of criticisms. Mind, either it feels hurt or it feels angry or both. Intellect, should I react or should I stay calm? If intellect is active, you have a calm response. If intellect is not active, or maybe you are feeling down, you are already worried about something, then what overcomes is your emotional reaction. So this shloka, which I recited a few minutes ago, it gives you the exact control system, which teaches you do not try to suppress emotions, rather strengthen your buddhi, strengthen your intellect. And by strengthening your intellect, your pattern changes, and you yourself see that your life may not have changed, the situations may not have changed, but your reaction changes the outside world, because the way you are responding, reacting on minute things, on small things, in whatever fashion, and the moment your response changes, the way people behave with you, that also changes automatically. And you don't control emotions at the level of emotion. See, at the level of emotion, it is very difficult. Okay, I'm angry, I should not shout, I should not shout. At level of emotion, it is difficult to manage it. Like when we teach our children that you are doing this, you shouldn't do they understand at the very moment? They don't. But over a period of time, by continuous nagging and making them not do anything, they automatically change. And as adult, we cannot expect that people are going to nag us, and when they do that, even we won't like it. So we need to develop that internal control system where we are the intellect part is supposed to be our guardian, and that guardian is controlling our mind and telling not to emotionally react and try to be at a level above. And your senses, when bring the world, your mind reacts, your intellect decides, and your self is a silent observer. And when we say God is watching, God is omnipresent, God is everywhere, what does it actually is? It is your own self. You can you must have witnessed various situations where you find that you remember things, even if when you are wrong, where you are wrong, when you are right, you, even if you choose the wrong action or maybe the right action, but yourself knows that this action is consciously accepted and this action is not accepted. So where should control come from? When your intellect becomes strong, your emotions become steady. And when such a thing happens, then you can master your mind, because mind is nothing but, you can consider it as your 4-year child um, uh, who has developed the senses but who hasn't developed the intellect. And that is why it is reacting in such an abrupt fashion. So this is how it is. And unless and until we understand this internal intellect, in the last session, we dealt with Dvesha and Raga. We were like identifying that this is Dvesha, this is Raga. And to understand how we are from inside, so that we can have the solution to our very own problems. As in the presentation slide, you can see there is a chariot and the horse is looking forward. But as you see the chariot of Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna himself was a charioteer, and he was guiding Arjuna throughout the war of Kurukshetra, Mahabharat, and he had horses. And when you see, there are 5 horses are there. What are those 5 horses? 5 horses moving in 5 directions, 5 senses. You want to see goodness outside. But when you have a very harsh tongue, how can you see the beauty outside? You yourself is burying the ground for yourself only. You are digging the hole for yourself, I must say. So when those 5 horses are the 5 senses, and the one who is the charioteer is nothing but our intellect and the higher awareness, which is uh, holding the horses and guiding them and controlling them. So once we understand that, life becomes much easier. Over to Dr. Sandhya.
Wow, Meenakshi, such a beautiful explanation.
Thank you.
I think this session is
Thank you.
helping us more because exactly
I
this
told
topic
you.
we are going through in the emotional regulation and we are forcing ourselves. So after the explanation that Meenakshi has given, we try to see the strategic cost of emotion. Now let's look at a situation. Let's say there's a sudden market crash. What would happen is an amateur would end up checking the portfolio every 5 minutes and eventually often selling the portfolio or selling the stocks when the market is right at the bottom. Why? Because his or her decisions are driven by impulse. As against that, if you look at a strategist, a person with a steady core, this person would acknowledge that yes, the market crash has happened due to external factors. So such a person would stick to long-term investment goals. Such a person would understand that when the market has come down, yes, the value of his stock has come down, but the value of many other stocks which are useful have come down. So instead of selling his stock at a low price, such a person can try to find which other stocks or stock is there in the market, which is right now having a low value, but which is eventually going to shoot up. So instead of selling his or her stock at low value, this person would try to buy more stock at low value. What would happen is this would eventually drive the cost of his or her portfolio down. So when the market comes back up, the overall value of his or her portfolio would increase. This means that a person reacting out of emotion very often tends to tends to see a distorted reality. Why? Because the bias sets in subjective filters. The bias prevents a person in seeing the objective reality. The bias often tends to make a person see things not as they are, but rather how the person feels, which eventually leads to strategic failure. Why? Because there's a loss of steady core. So the impulsive decision making that happens in such a situation, the strategy gets replaced by survival-based reaction. So regulation begins the moment we learn to distinguish between the things that we have control and the things that we do not have control. The case that comes to my mind right now is the case study of Tata, the resilience shown by Tata. Now, the Singur project. There was a time that due to political strife, the Singur project had become untenable. So in such a situation, Ratan Tata chose to move the Singur project, move the nano plant away rather than continue to struggle, because the continuous struggle would have eventually degraded the project's quality and would have affected the organization's integrity. So despite the chaos, Tata maintained a mental equilibrium, moving the billion-dollar project with calm decisiveness. Now, what happens? That means he chose to have the courage to say no to a compromised situation. Eventually, this led to saying, this was equivalent to saying yes to excellence. So the reactive chaos got converted to a steady core strategy. Now let's look at the strategies that would be advisable for a strategic architect. A strategic architect would have 3 drivers. One is regulation, second is strategic silence, and third is mental detachment. Regulation, that means because of the steady core of the strategic architect, the architect would ensure that the choices that he or she makes are based on values and not impulses. So while trying to regulate one's emotions and the choices that he or she makes, to ensure that the choices are well made, the strategic architect would choose strategic silence. Why the strategic silence is required? Because strategic silence is a situation where, let's say, for example, a person, while acting in a scenario, forcefully detaches himself to become a spectator for some time rather than simply acting. Now, this mental detachment from the core situation would help the evaluation of the entire scenario, looking at the big picture, would help the person in maintaining a composure even during high stressful moments. So, and the mental detachment, that is pulling one consciously out of a stressful situation, would actually act as an antidote to burnout. This would eventually lead to high performance without exhaustion. So here's let's look at the activity, the pause point protocol.
I have this modern and absolutely spick and span meeting room, but the report is a disaster. I am going to send a scorched earth email to everyone in the team and pull the plug on the project. I am done with being patient. So much of money is spent, yet where is the result?
Hold on, Ritu. I hear the fever speaking. You are in the heat of the moment. Ritu, stop just for 10 seconds.
10 seconds? We don't have 10 seconds. The deadline is just tomorrow.
If you send that email now, you aren't leading, you are just venting. Remember the hierarchy we discussed? Your senses are flooded, your mind is caught in result anxiety, but your intelligence, your buddhi is offline. Right now, you're letting the fever drive the car.
Okay, I think you are right. I'm just so angry that the team did not pay attention to the briefing we had.
Exactly. Anger is a smoke signal. It tells you something is burning, but it isn't the solution. Let's apply the pause point. What's the actual strategy priority right now? It's a blame or is it fixing the output?
The priority is getting the project over the line. If I scream at them, they will shut down. If I guide them, we might salvage it.
There it is. You just switch from reactive to proactive. Same situation, different internal state. Shall we drop a message that demand excellence, not just favor lovers, frustration?
Yeah, I think let's do it.
So, as we just read a slide, Sloka number 3.42, which explains the internal hierarchy. As I asked you to understand your internal system, your internal hierarchy. So, this is nothing but understanding your senses, your mind, then intellect, then your inner self, your higher self. And when you have the understanding about your internal hierarchy, you will be wondering. The moment you understand your internal hierarchy, you will be able to understand the internal hierarchy of all the people outside, because we all are same, and you will become a mind reader, and you won't even realize it, but it happens.
Yes.
So start working, and these things are not just theoretical, rather it's practical.
Yes. True. True. So here, now let's look at the practical implementation, the reactive chaos versus proactive clarity. I'm showing over here a scorecard. There are 4 metrics that are being used in the scorecard: focus, decision driver, energy level, and communication. And there are 2 different reactions: reactive chaos and a reaction where one shows proactive clarity. The driver, that is focus. So a person reacting in a reactive chaos, the focus of that person would be on the result, on the outcome. Whereas a person reacting with a proactive clarity, the focus would be on the process and the values. The decision drivers of a person reacting or using reactive chaos is generally impulse, because such a person is responding to the external stress. Whereas a person with a proactive clarity would use the internal intelligence as the driver to take decisions. So if you look at the person using reactive chaos, the energy level is often it's often spent due to burnout, due to anxiety. Whereas the person responding with a proactive clarity, what happens is such a person is able to sustain high performance for a much longer time. Even if you look at the communication metrics, the person responding in a reactive chaos tends to be aggressive, tends to be defensive. Whereas a person using proactive clarity would be non-agitated. The person would be prepared to face the truth. So what we are trying to say over here, we've said it in the previous session also. It's important to find your North Star. See, self-mastery is not about never feeling the fever. We are humans. It's normal to feel the stress. It's normal to feel the fever. It's normal to face a situation where we are angry. We tend to feel the initial pangs of greed. Yes, we tend to feel that. But it's important to understand the feeling of the fever and not letting that navigate your ship. Instead, controlling yourself, and then you yourself navigate the ship. So what I would try to say over here is I would recommend each of you to have your personal manifesto. Whenever you face the next crisis, if you want to operate from the steady core, okay, whenever a situation is happening, make your choice whether you want to be an actor or a spectator. Because when you choose to be a spectator, like let's say, for example, leader. For a leader, the North Star would be about maintaining integrity. For a creator, the North Star would be about maintaining quality. When that is your North Star, the fever of anger or the fever of greed, when it hits, such a person is simply able to ask his or her internal intelligence as to what action the fever or greed or anger is trying, what action the fever is trying to force them into. Is this action aligned with their North Star? So once they understand that it is not aligned, they would be able to take decisions much more objectively. So again, I repeat, in the next crisis, do operate from your steady core. So that's all that we had to say over here. Now, if you have been watching the video till now, we sincerely request you to write to us whatever questions you have, whatever queries you have. If you wish to share some incident with the viewers, we would definitely include all of those and we would address all your queries in the follow-up video for this session. Thank you so much for being with us. And yes, do subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much.